And so reminder, if you would not like to be seen on the webinar for ESG, because we will promote it online, you can turn your cameras off. But if you're okay with that, we love to see everyone's faces. It gives energy to the panelists and to our moderator. So we're excited to be joined by a wonderful panel who will be introduced by our moderator shortly. But we're also joined by panel moderator, Dr. Myra Virgil, CEO and Managing Director of the Bermuda Community Foundation, a grant-making organization with a mission of creating an enduring source of funds for Bermuda forever. Before stepping into this role, Myra was a foundation executive for the Atlantic Philanthropies, a global grant-making foundation with responsibility for seeking investment opportunities in Bermuda that fit with the foundation's mission and global programs. She's also the current chair of the Bermuda National Standards Committee, a member of the Bermuda Media Council Appointments Committee, and former governor of the Bermuda College. Myra holds a Bachelor of Arts with a major in Sociology, Bachelor of Social Work, and Master of Social Work degrees from McGill University, and a PhD in Social Science with a concentration in Organizational Behavior and Psychology. She is a 2013 Senior International Fellow of the Center on Philanthropy and Civil Society Graduate Center at CUNY and is a licensed social worker. So thanks for joining us, Myra, as our moderator, and I will hand it over to you to kick us off and introduce our panel.
Thanks very much, Nicola. And it's great to see all of your smiling faces and here to talk about ESG. The importance of ESG standards has been heightened on the corporate and public and nonprofit agendas. And in Bermuda, the standards and their associated frameworks have attracted so much and greater prominence and attention, particularly for Bermuda, given our links to the climate sciences. And in terms of what ESG has driven it to this level of prominence, there's been like such a growing interest in around this framework of sustainability from consumers around the world, and it's resulted in that, you hear the language about targets and goals being set, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and all of this sort of wrapped into this bundle of ESG and SDGs. And I'm sure all of us have seen in the media, the LinkedIns, the Facebooks, the posts, the TikToks, all that sort of stuff, that people want to act in this realm, and they want companies to act and even go beyond sustainable development and beyond what is sort of legally required. And to think, for companies in particular, to think beyond profits and more about purpose. Yesterday, and I thought, oh, how timely. There was an article by Stanford Social Innovation Review, and that article spoke to the ESG movement needing a shared language. That was the premise of the article. And the article kind of championed this idea of ESG needing a cross-sector collaboration, because it means so many different things to different people, but that with systems change like anything else, we have to build a shared understanding amongst a diverse group of stakeholders. And I thought, how timely. We have a webinar tomorrow where we're always trying to do more collective work and things together and have this shared understanding. I thought, thank you, Stanford Social Innovation Review. So it is worth defining and understanding what we mean by these three terms: environmental, social, and corporate governance, their connections to each other, and the implications for sustainable practices. So here to help us have this discussion are three really outstanding panelists. I don't think we could have selected a better group of panelists who I have the pleasure of introducing to help us have this conversation about ESG today. So with us today, we have Alison Gaudette, Adam Barboza, and Claire Larner. Alison is the Sustainability Manager at Argo International Holdings. She's been working in this role for the past 3 years. She's been directly involved with calculating the company's greenhouse gas calculations and setting reduction targets and strategies for reducing emissions. Alison's other projects have included global reporting and disclosures on TCFD, which I think she'll talk about more, sustainability reports, and the principles of responsible investing. Alison has always been passionate about embedding environment, social, and governance into business. She has an MBA specializing in international business and is pursuing her Master's of Liberal Arts in Sustainability at Harvard Extension School. So thank you for joining us, Alison. Welcome. Mr. Adam Barboza is the Director of Corporate Social Responsibility for Aspen Insurance Holdings Limited, based in Aspen's Bermuda office. With a BA degree from Mount Allison University and a long career in the tourism industry, Adam took on the opportunity and role of CSR at Aspen to help better focus the company's commitment to their communities. Aspen is passionate about having a positive impact on the environment and creating opportunities in their global and local communities. By being in it together using the power of partnerships, they work with third sector partners to help them make a difference. Aspen's corporate social responsibility pillars, which I know he'll talk about more for sure, are focused on the environment by doing their part to reduce the effects of climate change, creating innovative solutions for biodiversity, and creating future opportunities in the community through reducing inequalities, supporting health and well-being, and fostering quality education. Aligning their investment in this altruistic work with the UN Sustainable Development Goals brings a globally recognized standard to these partnerships and ultimately benefits those in need. Thank you for joining us today as well, Adam. Welcome. And last, Claire Larner has 15 years experience working on environmental, social, and governance issues. Most recently, Claire was a senior director in the sustainability and external relations function at Newmont Mining, which is the world's largest gold mining company, where she developed responsive strategies to differentiate Newmont as a leader on ESG issues, engaged global stakeholders, and tracked key trends. And Claire also led Newmont's work on human rights, the Sustainable Development Goals, and responsible sourcing. Prior to joining Newmont, Claire worked as a consultant, advising companies on developing short-term frameworks, including strategies for stakeholder engagement and tracking emerging issues, due diligence processes, such as integrating human rights into a range of business processes, human rights and reporting, and developing corporate standards and supporting their implementation at the operational level. Fantastic, guys. We can't ask for better resources and resumes on this. And prior to working as an independent consultant, Claire spent 8 years at the leading organization for sustainable development in the extractive sector, ICMM. She was responsible for managing multiple projects under 2 ICMM work programs, and she's recently returned to Bermuda and looks forward to continuing to engage on ESG topics. So guys, fantastic panel. I'm sure we're gonna have a great discussion. And we're going to actually kick it off. And I'm going to start actually with Claire. And Claire, I'm wondering if, to set the stage for this conversation, can you tell us about how ESG is being defined and some of those kind of key global trends to give us a sense of what's going on here?
Absolutely. Thank you, Myra. And thank you so much to the IIC for convening this panel. There is so much that the corporate sector and the not-for-profit sector can learn from each other. So I'm really thrilled to be part of this discussion. So I just thought I'd spend a little bit of time talking about some of those drivers of the ESG agenda for companies. So what we're seeing driving the action around this agenda. I'll define ESG so we're all on the same page in terms of what we mean when we talk about ESG. But I did want to recognize that the agenda itself is very broad, and actually what we're going to be focusing on today is a subset of the social piece of ESG. So we're going to be talking about donations and corporate contributions and what some term as CSR, corporate social responsibility, and that's the piece that fits in the social bucket of ESG. So the origins of ESG, the term was actually first used in a UN report in 2006, but it hasn't been until the last 5 years when we've really seen a huge amount of momentum increase around the agenda. And a lot of this is investor-led. So for example, Larry Fink, who is the CEO of BlackRock, BlackRock is the largest asset manager in the world and probably a major shareholder in most Bermudian companies. Larry was one of the first CEOs to speak out about how businesses really need to think about not only prospering financially, but also benefiting all stakeholders, including society at large. And investors are increasingly linking ESG risk management to long-term value creation and sustainability. And many have publicly stated that companies that don't address their ESG risks will see their valuations suffer. So you're seeing a big drive from investors. We're also seeing a big drive from governments worldwide who are implementing regulations around various aspects of the ESG agenda. So particularly in the human rights space and particularly around climate change, governments are really pushing for companies to align with the regulation that they've set in this space. And then we're also seeing employees increasingly scrutinize companies' values more intensely. And we know that younger generations are often very skeptical of business motives at the moment. We do have analysis that suggests that they don't think highly of leaders' impacts on society, their commitment to improving the world, or their trustworthiness. So that's another big driver for companies. And you know, when you look at all of those pieces, there's quite a lot of impetus for companies to act on these issues. So what do we mean by ESG? What are the specifics that we're talking about? In the environmental space, the environmental component is often dominated by discussions around climate change, but actually it's much, much broader, and it includes how commercial activities can impact the atmosphere, oceans, air, water, biodiversity, and nature. The social aspect has human rights at its core, and it's really concerned with things like labor rights and wages and a living wage and working hours. It's often in the social bucket where you will see companies' commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then companies are often thinking about their impacts on communities in the social bucket. And as I mentioned, it's really a component of this social piece that we'll be discussing today. And then lastly, governance typically refers to how corporations function ethically across the company. So this can include things like board composition, disclosures, compensations, and we are increasingly seeing executive compensation linked to ESG factors and the management of ESG risks. So that's a positive development. So that's a sort of a snapshot at the global level, some of those key drivers, some of the definitions that are well recognized. When you look closer to home in a Bermudian context and looking specifically at the reinsurance and insurance space, which Alison and Adam are going to talk about shortly, there was a recent study done that interviewed 21 executives from the sector and determined that 72% of companies have started engaging with ESG concerns and are at the early stages of their ESG journey. And a further 14% have a fully developed ESG approach or strategy. So finally, while ESG is typically a risk management strategy, companies often go well beyond this to thinking about economic development and their broader impact on society and their broader societal contributions. And it's those contributions that we will be talking about for the remainder of the panel. So I will pause there. Thanks, Myra.
Thank you, Claire. I found it was really powerful when we were talking about how employees can start to push the companies to really take and undertake to achieve some of these goals in the ESG, and then the idea that we're talking about this subset of the social. I think that people really find this very helpful in terms of when we think about the nonprofit sort of work and how we interact in this space. So thank you for that. I want to put a question to Adam, to Alison, around how, in terms of your industries, insurance, reinsurance, how do you see the ESG kind of framework being applied? What's been your experience so far? Let's start with Adam, and then we'll go to Alison.
Yeah, thank you very much. And Claire did an amazing job summarizing ESG. It's a very broad and dynamic and ever-changing subject, and I think summarizing it the way she has is excellent. In our industry, you know, we talked about stakeholder value, right? And you know, the number one stakeholder that companies really try to engage with are their employees, whether it's retaining talent, hiring new people. Millennials are looking for companies that do right and you know, contribute to communities corporately, and also empower the employees to do their thing as well. You know, insurance, reinsurance, it can get very complicated when talking about ESG and, you know, the principles of sustainable insurance, and then responsible investing. So there's lots of different components with this. And, you know, really companies look to third sector partners to help achieve some of the goals on their social agenda, right? And really, you talked about UN Sustainable Development Goals. That's kind of like the guiding beacon for what companies are looking for. There are 17 Sustainable Development Goals that the UN have created, and I think each one of the third sector partners on here deliver on some of the goals and objectives of those SDGs. So linking our contributions, our volunteering, our employee giving to what charities do to help deliver on sustainable development goals are key for companies. And I think that this topic is exploding. It's a conversation not only at executive meetings, but at board levels as well, and ensuring that there is the correct bottom-up approach and top-down approach to ensure that there's synchronicity there is important to, for any forward-thinking company. You want to be front-footed on this. You want to be, able to tell your story. You want to be able to engage with third sector partners to do good. And, Aspen, we have a global community of Aspen offices. We think globally, but we love local impact and things that really, either help us, with things around climate change or reducing inequalities in our communities. And, really, I think that's the key takeaways here are to try and, align the work that the third sector partners do with some of the goals and objectives.
That's very profound, Adam. Thank you, and I think that it's really important for people to hear how how companies may be trying to align their work with third sector partners to help deliver on these ESG goals. I think it's
no company can do that themselves. We need partnerships, and SDG 17 is the power of partnerships, and everyone on this call delivers a service to the end user that we feel are important, and that's why we engage in specific areas. Companies may have different objectives when it comes to what they're looking for to achieve. Some may focus more on education or health, some may focus on the environment, some may focus on the arts, but I think getting that mixed and diverse thinking is something that benefits all.
Absolutely. Thank you, Adam. Alison, can I throw the same question at you in terms of your perspectives and how the insurance and reinsurance space is applying these principles or thinking about these principles of ESG locally?
Right. So for us, what we did is we used to have the Argo Foundation, and it was kind of a group of people that were not really connected to what was going on so much in the community, in the sense they just more or less wrote checks. So we've disbanded that, and then we've taken that same budget and applied it across the international organization, and we now call them community resource committees. So we have a Bermuda committee, and then different ones within the US, one in London, and now it's made up of employees that get to make decisions on where this budget is paid out to, essentially within our own communities. So something like Bermuda Pride event, the people on the ground were passionate about that because at the same time it lines up with our employee resource groups. So we have 8 employee resource groups, and then we're making connections about where we're making financial contributions and how they're important to our staff as well. So it's making that link, and it's kind of almost like a full circle. And we have community give back days, so we're making connections with that as well for employees. In Bermuda, we have 2 days each, so it's paid time, and then you can break it down. You can do an hour a week. And then on top of all this, we're tracking all these metrics, and then we're reporting on them. So our sustainability report has all this, and it's a storyline that's tagged into it about how we're making a social impact and where we're kind of driving this and where it's coming from. But it's very much employee-led.
Alison, I'm going to throw a question at you. You could say I'm not sure if you don't know the answer, but when you talk about those metrics and tracking metrics, can you give people a taste of what one or two of them look like? What are they? What do you track?
Sure. So we're tracking financial contributions and then employee-led time. So the hours of how much volunteer we give back. And then we also have a program as well that comes in the financial amount, but we have give back. So if employees are passionate about a certain nonprofit, if they contribute, I think it's minimum $20, then the employee gives 100% to that to match as well. So it's the time and money we're tracking.
Yeah, and Myra, if I could jump in there as well,
Mhm.
the quantitative, you know, the hours, the money and things like that, those are vital for tracking for the company. But the qualitative, what impact does that have as well is really important. So, you know, from a third sector partner, it's a relationship, right? We don't want to just write a check and or, you know, give a donation or tell staff to go, you know, and volunteer for a specific event. We want to hear back, like, how did that benefit you? You know, if we planted mangrove trees, how did that, you know, how is that going? You know, is it taking, you know, if we're doing a coastal cleanup, if we're doing a, you know, a food bank or something like that, you know, how is that benefiting the third sector in the short and long term as well?
Absolutely. Either one of you, whoever wants to go first, but when you think about your companies or the companies that you consider sort of your colleagues in this space, have you noticed a shift? Have you seen this shift from whatever you were doing around this work before to now, in that the giving, the philanthropy, the whole ESG piece, and what has that shift looked like? You want to go first, Alison, then we'll hit up Adam, or vice versa?
Yeah, well, just very much the shift. I think companies are grasping what ESG means. We're really much at a point of inflection, and they want to make partnerships to see how there is a community impact. And I think from nonprofits, when they define what they're doing, communities can make partnerships, and then it makes sense if they know what the story is and what nonprofits are affiliated with. So yeah, it's making that connection.
Okay, thank you. Adam?
Yeah, and connection is one thing, collaboration is another, right? You know, the third sector partners, you all discuss with each other what things are doing, engaging donors in that discussion and collaboration, and making some of those connections as well, I think is a great shift. You know, Alison spoke about it very well, that a foundation used to write a check, and that, you know, that was a great thing to do. But now it's more, how do you engage with that as a more sort of holistic approach? And, you know, how do you get your staff involved with that? How do one, you know, staff ask, why do we do things? You know, and it's really raising awareness of the issues, you know, around climate, around things like homelessness and education and health, and then having the third sector partners be a part of the answer. And then that really allows staff to be more involved with one, the discussion at a corporate level, but two, how can they contribute on an individual level? And Alison spoke about, you know, employee matching. Aspen has a similar program. So that sort of doubles the impact that someone can make themselves.
As you both are speaking, and I'm going to ask you, Claire, to chip in on this as well, but you're making me think that part of the work for a nonprofit, as they already, the programming is good, but as they think about how to get funding support, is to take a look at some of those SDG goals and the ESG sort of framework and that subset of the social piece, and see how does this program align, because very often there are very clear alignments, but they haven't been as articulated in the same way, and that could be a shift for the nonprofits that's starting to articulate how the program aligns specifically with some of these goals, as opposed to just the description. What do you think about that, though? Does that make sense as a reframe?
Yeah, I think it's aligning with that, but it's also, it's telling your story. What is your organization doing? What is the problem in the community? And then how has your organization come to meet that problem? And that's where companies make the connection and make the network. When I was preparing for this, I started thinking about a lake I studied for one of my classes. So this lake in Maine, in some remote inland area, and they wanted to raise funds because algae was becoming a problem, and they admitted themselves were not in an area that's kind of high givers where people have deep pockets. But what they did is they created a story about this lake and people grew up on it. And this algae problem, if it continues, it's not going to be anymore. It's going to shut down. So this became personal to people, and it kind of hit a chord with everyone that these memories of swimming and growing up on this lake is going to not be able to pass down to the rest of their community. So they had that buy-in. They created a membership structure, and they created different tiers, and then they created a gift giving program so people could go on and buy gifts. I think people are at the point too where we have enough stuff, and it's kind of, people like to do that, give gifts on behalf. So you can buy a gift card or made a donation or a memoriam kind of thing as well. So there's kind of almost that aspect as well that people can tap into, but it's what's personal and how it impacts the community. And that's what triggers kind of, yeah, how do we make it an issue of
I
this?
hear it. I'm hearing it in both of what you're saying in terms of it's not only just the employee piece, but the community piece. How does this issue impact the community, and how can we wrap it back around to what the company wants to help change in the communities that they are work in and exist. Very, very, very interesting, guys.
Yeah.
Claire, Adam,
sorry,
go ahead.
it's a very circular relationship, right? And I think that charities need to, one, take a look in the mirror, know what you do well, don't try and please everybody and be all to everybody, and really focus on that. And Alison spoke about it very well. Tell your story. And if you research the SDGs, the way that companies like to do it, specific companies, then come to them with a specific program that helps to deliver on the charity's objectives, but also aligns with corporate giving or volunteering or something like that. So I think being very sort of targeted in an approach to a specific problem is key.
Okay, thank you, Adam. And I'm going to come back and hit you guys with a little tough question later, but we'll all try to tackle it. Claire, can you reflect on this question too, around if there's a shift, or what do you think you're seeing locally and how it's all starting to fall out or fall up?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Adam and Alison spoke to this notion that funding decisions, and there's much greater alignment now between funding decisions and corporate strategies. So in the past, it may have been one person approving or denying a grant request, for example. And now, as Alison mentioned, you often have a much more rigorous process. So in Argo's case, it's employees deciding how funds should be spent. You see often corporate committees now where decisions are made by consensus. So there's a lot more intentional approval, I guess, of funding requests. And I think that companies are very public now in what they disclose around their sustainability strategies. So you would probably be able to find the key priority sustainable development goals of Argo and from Adam's company in their some sort of public reporting. And that gives you a hook to think about, okay, does our mandate as a not-for-profit fit with any of these? And if so, let's use that as the leverage point when we're requesting fundings or when we're putting in a grant request. So I think that sort of alignment is it has been a shift. I think also companies are now looking to not-for-profits to fill expertise gaps that they might have in the company in a greater way than they may have done in the past. So for example, if you're a company and you have a strategic objective around improving employee health and well-being, for example, and you know that improving community health can have positive outcomes for employee health. So you may look towards those nonprofits in the community that are working on health issues, for example. And I think that's something that companies are being more strategic about than they might have in the past. So just a few pieces there.
Yeah, and I'm hearing you talk kind of like a through line from employees out to the community, out to making changes to the community, and back through to having a good company and having a good place to work and place to be. Yeah, all of you've kind of heightened how that looks. We may have I have some questions already here, but we may have already touched on this. But let's see if we can go a deeper level for the groups that have joined us today. And as I said, I think some of you have touched on it, but let's go see where this goes. In terms of advice that you might offer to nonprofits looking for corporate funding? And this is not to pin, you know, any of your institutions down, but looking for advice on funding. And we've talked a little bit about alignment, but let me throw a little extra at this and we'll see where it goes. And that is, what if the work as a nonprofit that you were doing doesn't clearly align? Just doesn't seem to fit. And I mean, actually, you'd be hard pressed not to find something in the SDGs, but let's say that it's just not clearly aligning. What advice could we offer some groups, or how can we think creatively about helping to become part of the work of the ESGs, and helping to kind of quote unquote fit into this mandate? Is there any advice or thoughts that we can offer?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a tough question as well. You know, sometimes it may help the charity to do a little bit of a reset and do a bit of sort of strategic planning on their own. To you know, a charity may have started off on a certain vein and kind of drifted one way or the other based on certain needs in the community, certain boards of directors that help to change those needs. And I think if, you know, there's so many companies out there, they have different agendas. You know, some may, like I've said before, some may be focused on the arts, whereas some may not. And, you know, the arts is one of those ones that kind of falls in a place in the SDGs where they're not specifically targeted, but they do, you know, they do provide certain levels of engagement there. So I think really, you know, defining what the charity's goals and objectives are themselves, and, you know, really, you know, we've talked about it, tell that story, be good at what you do. You know, the other thing that we found is that multiple charities try and deliver on the same agenda, right? And you have multiple charities saying, we're trying to tackle homelessness, or we're trying to tackle, you know, certain health issues and things like that. So the collaboration amongst charities to be able to, you know, to deliver on a specific social issue, I think is important as well. And, you know, you may have a charity that's trying to deliver on multiple things and spreading themselves thin in that regard. You know, with this collaboration with others, you might have more focus in one specific area, and another charity have a different focus, and you're ultimately collectively achieving a goal that you know, has a social impact.
All right, that's really helpful, Adam. And because what I heard you say was that it's important to kind of define and even reflect on what your program's trying to deliver with these objectives in mind. I heard you say collaboration on an agenda, which I think is something that we've talked about a lot as a sector, but really being able to demonstrate where one starts, where the other picks up, and what's the handoff is not the same as saying one is more important than the other. It's saying this is the pipeline, this is the continuum of the work, and that's so powerful. So thank you for kind of heightening that. And then the last thing you said, which I thought was really good, was the focus on outcomes. And, you know, is this going to deliver in those outcomes? And I'm not hearing you actually say changing mission, which is what sometimes people think, oh, well, we have to change what we do. Not hearing that. I'm hearing more about looking at programmatic kind of approaches, which is, it's pretty powerful to hear. Alison, and then Claire.
What Adam said is, find out what your story is, but then I wouldn't try to focus on fitting with what somebody else is doing. Find out exactly what your purpose is, what your mission is, define that. I look at KBB, I don't know if they're on this call, but I'm going to use you as an example because I can't stop seeing them. They're all over LinkedIn, they're on social media, and they couldn't do anything more simple. They're picking up trash, but they're focusing on that, and they've made partnerships. They even have recruited tourists. So people have gotten on a plane, come to Bermuda, and they're picking up trash. And so when we see that impact, the stories, the metrics, and it's published and it kind of hits at home. And we saw that as a community resource committee. And so we made a financial contribution. We're seeing the progress, the good work of what they're doing and the impact it's having. And from that, they got financial contributions a couple years over year.
Mm.
Yeah, and with KBB is a great example. They also help companies with their own sort of knowledge about waste and you know, how they as a company can be better, you know, reducing or eliminating single-use plastics, recycling, things like that. So, you know, that's a story that KBB can help, you know, tell that story to a company, but then that penetrates down and gives employees sort of that, how can I make a difference as well?
Absolutely.
They are
Claire,
on the call, so KBB is on the call. Thank you.
Claire, do you want to
Yeah,
can
thanks,
you speak to
Myra.
that as well?
Yeah, and I was just thinking about agendas and alignment. I mean, as I mentioned at the outset, the ESG space is so broad, and I don't think any company is expecting a nonprofit to have an ESG strategy encompassing all areas. I think as Adam said, the more focused and clear you can be about your mandate, the better. So if I was sitting in a company and I had to give, I had to approve grants, I'd really be looking for, you know, very clear outline of how the funds will be used, what the expected outcomes will be, and any sort of past performance related to the request. So your track record, I guess, in working on the areas that you're working on. But then I'd also ask myself some very specific questions. So looking at a grant request, I'd ask myself, is this strategic? So does it address both short-term and long-term objectives? Does it focus selectively on a few key areas which will have the greatest impact? Is it aligned to my corporate strategy? So does it align to the specific issues that I have as a business, but also the development priorities of communities, of civil society and government, so that there is a way of working towards shared value? Is it multi-stakeholder driven? So will it position the company as one actor in a multi-stakeholder process rather than the principal actor in promoting local development? Is it sustainable? So is it going to avoid dependency, encourage self-reliance, create long-term benefits that outlast that individual piece of company support? And then finally, is it measurable? So can we measure the return on community investment to both the company and the community? And I think if nonprofits are very specific and focused on answering some of those questions, it makes it very easy for companies to look at a request and say, you know, this is strategic, it's aligned, it's measurable, you know, where do we sign? So just some advice there.
Yeah, very, very powerful. Even in the sense of like knowing what space you're acting in. You spoke about being, am I the one actor as part of a continuum of work or part of the landscape? Am I leading on this? Where do I fit? How am I measuring impact? It's really all very important. All three of you had referenced sort of some groups that you've seen doing this well. One or two. Is there any more that you want to speak about that you've said, oh, this represents some really best practice, or some of the best ways that people are taking to this ESG approach and the SDGs? Do you have any more examples?
One example for us is we had a personal letter come in. So this lady wrote a letter and she wrote this personal story, and it was about one of the schools, not the regular private and public schools. This was for different styles of learning. Mm-hmm. So, and the tuition is rather hefty. And so we looked at this letter, and then all these children all have different kind of skills and abilities, but they need different tools, and these are a little bit pricier. So that really tugged at our heartstrings as well. And then again, we spoke about it as a group, and it's something we felt passionate about, and we've made a financial contribution to that as well. It's the personal aspect that really, the story gets to the people. And that's what sustainable marketing is just telling the whole story.
Thanks, Alison. Adam, you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, so it's hard to single out anyone, because everybody that we have partnered with have got to the point where we're partnering because you know, they do a great job, they tell a great story. I think one thing that that Claire kind of hinted on, but that the governance structure of the charity itself is sound. That, you know, that there's you know, a diverse board involved with the charity. You know, Alison pointed out they have a committee. We have a committee. Our committee actually doesn't involve any senior level executives. They are all sort of junior and mid-level people within the company, and they bring that diverse approach to being able to respond to requests and things like that. We actually use a portal to accept donations in, so there has to be a bit of an eligibility criteria. You have to have a, you know, you have to be a registered charity, you have to have a governance structure, things like that, to be able to apply. And in some regards, that helps to focus the request ask to a more defined thing. But I also want to say that, you know, during COVID, it taught us that you can't necessarily keep things in a very sort of a linear way. You have to be able to, companies need to be flexible to be able to respond to, you know, social needs. And a lot of companies got together and they did things like, you know, donating ventilators to the hospital, helping the feeding programs because more people were being displaced. So I think companies understand the need to be able to be responsive to community needs as well. And it's not just about environment, but it's about those community needs. And I think if a charity, you know, identifies that need, telling that story in a great way helps to expand the knowledge base of companies about what these needs actually are. I think that's important as well. You know, we can't know everything.
Oh my goodness.
We don't
Absolutely.
we don't ever pretend to say that we have all the answers. It's this power of partnership that helps us to kind of get to the place where the end users are benefiting. So are we reducing, you know, hunger in Bermuda? Are we reducing homelessness? Are we, you know, providing quality education for people that just may need an upper hand to get back into the system? And then, you know, with the environmental things, you know, shouting out to BZS, WaterStart, the National Trust, they help, you know, deliver on multiple agendas around education, around environment, you know, things like that. So I think really identifying sort of that space that we talked about, that space that you work in, be great at it, and don't be shy to tell your story.
Oh my gracious, Adam, it was literally where I was headed. So thank you for highlighting that, because I was hoping to kind of be able to say, and so I'm going to say it now, that I didn't want it to be lost that it is the nonprofits, for the most part, community-based groups, grassroots organizations, anchored organizations, who will know the need, who will help advise the companies around what are the critical issues and how they fit with the SDGs. And I think that there's that idea that it has to be such a partnership, because, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but companies are not in this business full time, whereas nonprofit organizations are. They're going to know the extent to which these issues are a problem and how they filter up and through. So it really is this partnership between corporate and private sector, nonprofit and government. You're so bang on that.
And I think I saw a comment come in around collaboration between donors. That is something that, you know, I think we all strive towards, right? We can't individually tackle these problems. The donors as a group help by the best means that they see fit. But, you know, we understand too that our partnerships help to achieve more collectively than we do individually. And I think that's key as well, that you know, we're not in this to put our logo on anything or get a press release. Those are nice things to have and it raises awareness, but that's not the ultimate objective. The ultimate objective is this qualitative impact on community.
Absolutely. And the donors don't determine the priorities. In an ideal word, it's people on the ground who kind of say, in relation to these global priorities, here's what it looks like locally, and here's how we're helping to address it. And then we can help you address your SDG and ESG goals.
Yeah.
Really good. I'm just going to pull a question from the chat. Sorry, I'm now keeping an eye on, like, oh, there's questions here. So, and we have about 10 minutes, guys. So I'll just roll up and see what I can find. One of the questions for the panel is that, and it's a comment first, there is a concern that a focus on and budget for ESG, specifically the E portion of ESG, will mean a decrease in corporate philanthropy / direct donations to nonprofits. So the question is, that focus on the environment might need, what I'm understanding, lead to a decrease in corporate philanthropy or direct donations to the nonprofits as a whole. Can you speak to that? Does anybody want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I think it's actually helps companies invest more. You know, that you know, charities, third sector partners identifying issues and bringing them to the forefront, raising awareness of them help. Hate to go back to KBB, but they raised the issue about abandoned and derelict boats being, you know, strewn across the shorelines, and they've made a targeted approach to try and clean that up. But one of the things that we went back to KBB and asked about was getting to the root of the problem, right? And like, how do we help change legislation that creates sort of mandatory insurance and boat registrations and, you know, the ability to fund government to remove derelict boats from the shorelines? So I think that, you know, that was an issue that we all knew about, but like, how do we tackle that problem holistically? And I think that, you know, Alison, you know, can probably verify, but we have to go and present a budget and a plan every year to senior management to be able to continue with our CSR activities. And our senior executives buy into this. And it's a part of the culture at companies to be able to do this. So, you know, I think that if anything, you know, the budgets for community impact will increase rather than decrease.
Especially if we can articulate that story. Absolutely, Adam. Don't feel pressured, guys, but Claire, and then I'll come back to you, Alison. Do you want to take a stab at this this concern about the focus in the budget and decrease?
Yeah, and I don't think it should necessarily be a concern. I think companies, just on the sort of climate risk, environmental piece, companies are embedding that piece much more into their general risk management structures, shall we say. And I think that keeps it slightly separate from what might otherwise be funded in the corporate contributions, community contribution space. So I don't think that's a concern. I think if you, you know, heed all the advice that's been provided through this panel in terms of focus of mandate, measuring outcomes, etc., that's much more powerful than that will make a powerful case, and I wouldn't expect to see a decline in funds.
Thanks, Claire. Cool. Alison, do you want to take a stab?
Yeah, I'm just thinking from on a global perspective that E, environmental, has a huge impact on society as far as food security, there's migrations, there's water scarcity, and then even more profound than that, there's environmental racism. So thinking about that, how does that impact the local Bermuda community? It's maybe you could kind of see what it links to where we are here in Bermuda, what the results are from that.
So trying again to not lose focus of what you do, but look at your programs and see how they align locally with those larger things.
Yeah, because
isn't that right?
It's all interconnected, the E, the S, and the G. It really is interconnected, and how we are part of a global society, and we are thinking at a local level, but it's just, how is it impacting Bermuda, essentially?
And
because
then
only we can tell that story.
Exactly.
And just one other point, Myra, you know, insurance and reinsurance companies, you know, they make their money by underwriting business. The investment team takes that money, invests it to, you know, increase the value of the company. But there's one thing that we can't buy or create, and that's the social capital, right? That we do by empowering charities to be able to do their work. And social capital is you know, one of these key things that create this multiple bottom line in companies. You know, you got profit, you have risk, you have you know, all of the all the things that go into it, social capital is vital to companies, and it's an investment that companies make to try and broaden their stakeholder base.
Yeah, again, we keep coming back to this. All goes back and forward and circuitous in terms of this closing this circle of good social change. Guys, we have 6 minutes. I see one more question, and then we're going to go to closing. I'm going to come back to you for closing remarks. But let me try to squeeze this question in. When no specific grant maximum is given, so now we're back to applying for grants to the companies. How best is it to tackle to consider or to tackle the upper threshold of what to ask for? We are often afraid to ask for too much and be turned away. Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I've seen different numbers come in, and I would say put it a grant or between or a threshold, 2,000 to 5,000 or 5,000 to 10,000, because we have a certain amount. After it reaches that point, then we have to go to corporate, and then it's a bigger conversation and a presentation. So that kind of takes more time and energy, but maybe just kind of give a threshold of what you're looking for. And then oftentimes we've kind of gone to the maximum of that, or people have asked for a certain amount and we've surpassed that just because of what our budget is. We're trying to play and we're trying to do the best we can. So I wouldn't be afraid of that.
Okay, and Alison, are those things, just before I come back to you, Adam, but Alison, are those sorts of thresholds published, or
no, we haven't published what our maximum amount is. No.
Okay, all right, cool. Adam?
And I think using sort of a multi-year approach to a specific project is something that can help with that sort of bigger number. I know some charities are looking at capital projects. Sometimes, there is a budget allocation set aside for capital projects versus, an actual, a more project specific one. So I think it's this two-way discussion, right? And, you have to have short and long-term objectives. If getting to your long-term objectives means that you're asking, for more money over more time of more people, and it helps you get to that point, ultimately you're delivering on that sort of vision of the charity in that sort of multi-pronged approach.
Yeah, Adam, I was just going to emphasize that dialogue piece that you'd also mentioned at the outset, that often if the individual in companies that is part of the grant approving process, then I'm sure a conversation before you submit a request would be totally appropriate. And then they can set some of the guidelines. They might be able to give you some advice on their strategic priorities. So I think that dialogue is very important. And then you can co-create something versus, just hoping for the best.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're almost at the stage where we're going to wrap up. And I was hoping to give the three of you sort of an opportunity to make a sort of closing remark or final remark. We've covered so much material today. You've been very generous with your expertise and insights on this. But you want to give us a final sort of where you stand, or what you think, or how you want to sum up what you said today? Who wants to go first? How about Alison? Are you prepared to go first?
I think if what we're looking for right now, for example, is our community give back days. If it's kind of spelled out for us what we can do, what we can accomplish. So if we can make it a group event, or people can venture off on their own, if you have the tasks or the chores, anything that's broken down, that's kind of, I hate to say it, if you can kind of spoon feed it to us, then there's a hook. We're there. We'll be giving community days, and then you're going to get people on board, and they'll probably give the weekends as well.
Okay, so the idea of how can you further engage even beyond, or as part of the mission and the work that you're doing, how can you further engage and make it clear to the company or to who you're applying how they might be involved? Yeah, cool. Thank you, Alison. Claire, and Adam, I'll finish up with you. Claire?
Yeah, not too much to add. I think this has been a great discussion, and yeah, really appreciate the engagement. I've learned a lot, so appreciate being on the panel. Maybe just to reiterate the last pieces that I mentioned with the advice, just thinking about strategic, aligned, multi-stakeholder driven, sustainable and measurable requests. But thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Claire. Adam.
Yeah,
Final
I mean,
remarks, closing remarks.
it's a great discussion, and I hope it doesn't end today for sure. Nicola has all of our contact details. Feel free to get in touch with us. I think really it's, creating this stakeholder value that helps one, the charity achieve their objectives, two, aligns with the company and the employee mandate. Like I said, our number one stakeholders are our people. And it's important that we tell a good corporate message in regard to what we do with our communities. And then three, it's like, tell your story, be good at what you do, and don't be afraid to speak up and say, I'm good at this. I'm tapping myself on the back as charity XYZ. This is what I've done. This is how I've helped the community, and really do a great job on social media, things like that, where you raise your awareness of your profile. A company may step in and help you, their employees may step in and help you, but you want the bigger pond of people to be able to know what you're doing and how to help, and how individualizing that can make a difference for you.
You guys, Adam, Claire, Alison, your insights have been so powerful and just so thoughtful, and I know you put a lot of time into even being prepared for today, and it shows, and it's very much appreciated. I like to think that I speak for all of us in terms of advancing our understanding of ESG, helping to build a shared understanding of what that will look like, what it needs to look like going forward, and how we can all participate and our very important and distinct roles in making this happen in Bermuda. I think you guys have really nailed that on the head this morning. Want to thank IAC for organizing today's session. Thank you. Thank you to all of you who have participated. Nicola, do you want to add anything before we
Sure.
close?
Just reiterating thanks to panelists and to you, Myra, for moderating, and for everyone that joined today to learn more and take time out. We know how busy you all are, so thank you. Just a nudge to complete the webinar evaluation. It's very, very short, but what would be very helpful for us is, we know people like these webinars with donors. If you could give us some direction on what specifically you would like to talk about, that would be helpful in helping us to keep creating more of these. But thank you again to Adam, Claire, Alison, and Myra, and to everyone for joining today. Have a great rest of the day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.